Pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Good evening. On behalf of the Kuwait Foundation for the Advancement of Sciences, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this KFAS speaker event. Our goal is to transform Kuwait into a knowledge-based economy, and we strive to achieve this through the promotion of science, technology, and innovation. This evening, we have arranged to have a special guest join us to share his insight and expertise. Dr. Peter Wilton is a senior lecturer at UC Berkeley Haas Business School. In this forum, Professor Wilton aims to illustrate the process of sustaining organizational leadership through disruptive innovation. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Wilton.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity to come to Kuwait. This is not my first visit to the Middle East. I've been to the Middle East many times, Oman, Saudi Arabia, UAE. Very recently, as a matter of fact, and in a week I'll be going back to Saudi Arabia. So my great pleasure to be able to come to Kuwait and add Kuwait to my list of welcomed countries in the Middle East. I am here to share with managers and professionals from Kuwait the topic of innovation and how we think about this at UC Berkeley. At UC Berkeley, we focus on entrepreneurship and innovation, and part of the reason for that is we are in the heart of Silicon Valley. And as most of you know, Silicon Valley is one of the world's leaders in innovation, both technologically and in terms of business models. Because of my role, I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of boards of directors of companies, and also chief executives, as well as many government organizations, public sector organizations. And these days, they all have the same basic question. There are two questions that I get asked all the time. The first question is, we have an innovation strategy in our organization, but we have no idea if it's effective. We don't know how to benchmark our innovation. We don't know if it's really world-class or not. So we'd like to know how to improve our innovation strategy. The second question that I am being asked all the time is, by chief executives and boards in particular, we know we are going to be disrupted. We know disruption is everywhere, and we know we are going to be disrupted, but we have no idea when, we have no idea how, we have no idea what to do about it. We have no idea whether we should disrupt ourselves or just wait for somebody else to disrupt us. So please help us understand the threat and opportunity of disruption. So let me ask you a question. What does disruption mean to you? What do you think we mean by that term? Anybody? Something new, yes. Why do they call it disruption? New doesn't necessarily mean disruption, does it?
It will affect our time, cost, and quality.
It could have an effect on time, cost, and quality, yes.
It's not linear.
I beg your pardon?
Not linear.
It's not linear. Yes, I think the closest definition that we like to use is it's disrupting the status quo. Right? The status quo is the way things are today. The reason we call it disruption is somebody's about to change the status quo. Now, we've discovered that there's a particular kind of organization that struggles with that question. And what kind of organization would that be? What kind of organization actually has a very difficult time truly innovating? Any idea?
I think the incumbent organization, the dominant organization, or the organization that had lots of success in innovation in the past, and they're dominating the market right now.
Absolutely correct. Why would the incumbent organization, why would, in fact, the most successful organization actually struggle with innovation? Why? And I'm going to give you the answer to that question in my first slide. It goes to the heart of the definition of innovation. This is my definition of innovation, and what it basically means is you're willing to challenge your assumptions about how to be effective and how to be efficient as an organization. Now, challenging your assumptions about how to be effective and how to be efficient is very difficult to do when you're successful. When you're successful, what do you believe you should do? Don't change anything. Keep doing exactly what you've done before. And so the companies that tend to have the greatest difficulty with real innovation, which I'll explain in a moment, are the ones that are the most successful. They do not like to challenge their assumptions. So let's take a look at what can happen to organizations like that. This is a study done by some professors at Stanford. Our topic today is how to maintain your leadership. And this study looked at that question. What is the challenge in trying to maintain your leadership? And the answer is very simple. When things are changing gradually, it is very easy to maintain your leadership. Gradual change does not threaten any organization at all. However, there's a particular kind of change that does threaten an established organization. And it's called discontinuous change and shocks, the disruptive change. Now that presents a real challenge to existing leading organizations and potentially threatens their leadership. Let me show you what this means. There's two ways to really think about innovation, and we put it on a spectrum. Think of innovation as a continuum. At one end of the continuum is what we call sustaining innovation. And in sustaining innovation, we try to improve what we are already doing. We call it incremental innovation. You might call it continuous improvement. You might call it a quality program. But basically what you're trying to do is improve things the way they are today. That is the red line. We call that sustaining innovation. The disruptive innovation is the blue line. Let me explain the blue line. That is an approach to creating value for your stakeholders or for your clients that never previously existed. Now, why is that innovation so difficult for established organizations to react to? The first reason it's difficult is because of this. We have a scale here called the value of what you're doing to your stakeholder or your customer. So you've got an outside stakeholder and they're looking at what you're doing and they're assessing whether it's creating value for them. Could be a public sector organization, could be a private sector organization, it doesn't really matter. The customer could be a citizen, the customer could be a consumer, the customer could be another company. But they're expecting you to create value for them. So you begin looking at the new innovation, the blue line, and you compare it to what is happening today. And what you discover is, based on that comparison, it looks inferior. And the simplest example is Kodak. Kodak invented the digital camera. Kodak is out of business. How could the company that invented the digital camera go out of business? That makes no sense, correct? Why is that? What happened? Well, Kodak made the mistake of taking the digital camera to their existing customer, which was a professional photographer, and they showed that camera to the professional photographer and asked them what they thought. What does a professional photographer want? Does anybody know? Most important thing to a professional photographer, who is the most important stakeholder to Kodak, what do those people want? They want a really high quality image. What was the quality of the first digital camera? How many megapixels? 1. What did Kodak's customer tell them about that innovation? It's terrible. So what did Kodak do with that information? Did they start investing in digital cameras? No. What they actually did was give that technology away. So that is the first problem of reacting to disruptive innovation. You are listening too much to your existing customer. Actually, the digital camera was not designed for a professional photographer. It was designed for somebody else. Who found the digital camera really useful? Who? Bad photographers. What is the problem of a bad photographer? Problem of a bad photographer is they have to take 100 photos to get one good one. And with film, you could not do that. But with a digital camera, how many photos can you take? Thousands. So how many of you took your digital camera with you on your last vacation? You took your phone, your digital camera. How many photos did you take? Thousands. Hundreds. And then you came back home and you spent 3 months sorting through the photos, and you found 3 really good ones, and you sent them to your friends. And they said, wow, what a beautiful photo. You should be a professional photographer, right? Kodak didn't see that. They gave the technology away. And so that is the first problem. The second problem with the disruptive innovation is it is going to improve at a faster rate than the sustaining innovation. The slope of improvement is steeper. So how many megapixels can we get today? 40 megapixels, 60 megapixels. And how long did that take? 10 years. Compare that to the rate of improvement in film, right? It is much steeper. So in the beginning, you don't believe in the disruptive innovation, but you begin to realize that the rate of improvement is different, and you begin to realize that right around here, right as it's about to overtake film. Now you're Kodak. What do you do then? You have 2 choices. Stay on the red line. Keep making film. Good idea or a bad idea? Bad idea because the digital is going to take over. Okay, let's start making digital cameras. Good idea or bad idea?
Competing with big ones.
Bad idea. You're late. You gave the technology away. Somebody's already using it. Somebody's ahead. But secondly, if you did start making digital cameras, what would happen to your existing film business? It would die. So as the incumbent, as the established successful firm, you have 2 options, and they are both equally bad. What do you do when you have 2 really bad options?
Think of a third one.
Think of a third one, which is the right answer. But most companies will form a committee. They'll form a committee and they will study both options, and that will take another 6 to 12 months, and they will come back with the same conclusion. Do you begin to realize why established companies have a difficult time reacting to discontinuous or disruptive innovation? We see this problem not just in Kodak. I'm telling you the Kodak story, and most of you know the Kodak story. Are there any other examples of this problem? Oh, Nokia is one. Here are many other examples. On the left are the successful firms from the past. On the right are the organizations that have replaced them as leaders. So Kodak was replaced by the digital camera. BlackBerry was replaced by the iPhone. Does anybody remember having a BlackBerry? Does anybody have a BlackBerry today? Yes? Yes. How many have a BlackBerry? 1, 2, 3. Right, that's about BlackBerry's market share, about 3%, right? Now that is really amazing because BlackBerry had the highest customer loyalty of any electronic product in the world. And within 3 years it was gone. I will tell you why that is later. But that's a really, really important piece of evidence that says just because you're successful now does not mean you will be successful in 3 years' time. Right? Now what else? Blockbuster Video. Used to be a DVD rental store. Does anybody go to a DVD rental store anymore? No. That's very interesting. Now we rely on Netflix or some other video streaming. Look at the list. Anything else on the list you don't understand? Because this is a very important list. And it illustrates that it wasn't just Kodak that we talk about. It's many, many different industries and many, many different leading companies who are no longer relevant. Do you see Microsoft on the list? Why is Microsoft on the list? Right? That's still a great company, right? Big company. But is it a leader? No, it's not a leader. There's been 4 or 5 major shifts in computing. Search. How many of you use Google? Wait, Microsoft has a search engine called Bing. How many of you use Bing? No. Right. What about mobile computing, mobile phones? Microsoft has a mobile phone. Who uses a Microsoft mobile phone? Nobody. Content, applications, content, music, videos. Where do you go to get that today? Apple. Go to Apple or you go to Android shop. Microsoft used to have a content store and it was called Zune. It no longer exists. Cloud computing, social media. Look at all of the major developments in computing today, and where is Microsoft? Nowhere. We don't think of them as the leader. So what I'm suggesting to you is you may not disappear, but you lose the leadership reputation. Nobody looks to you for the future of that category anymore, right? Any others that you're not familiar with or you would like to talk about?
Venture capital. Venture capital.
Venture capital. Yes, I'm an investor in a venture capital fund as well because we're so close to Silicon Valley. And we believed any startup business must come to us for venture capital. So we acted like monopolists or oligopolists. We're in charge, we are arrogant, we tell you what the terms will be, you must come to us. Not anymore. Where do you go to get funding for a great idea? Crowdsourcing. Kickstarter, our crowd. These are all over the world. There's versions of them in the Middle East, there's versions of them in Europe, there's versions of... So venture capitalists have lost a lot of their influence in the funding of startups, right? Anything else? Yes? Education. Fascinating. What's the big shock to a university? I come from a university. By the way, Berkeley's the #1 public university in the world. Only 2 universities above Berkeley, and they're both private. We are publicly funded. What are the shocks to a university in higher education? What are they? There are 2. One is online. And what is the other one? If you're a public university. Money, funding. I am in the business school at Berkeley. 10 years ago, we received 90% of our budget from the government. Today, we receive 10%. What would you do if you lost 90% of your budget in 10 years? So those 2 problems converged on my university. Online education and declining funding. What do you do about that? Stay on the red line? No, you cannot stay on the red line. That's not going to work, right? You can't just try harder to deliver traditional education. We thought about what to do. We have to give people a reason to come to the face-to-face classroom so that they don't go online. And we have to find a way to make money. So those 2 problems challenged us, and we focused on the immediate problem was let's get money from somebody else. Let's get money from students. So we raised the fees for an MBA by 40% in 1 year. What happened? Raised the fees by 40% in 1 year. The number of students applying for the MBA went up, down, or stayed the same? It went up. It went up by 40%. So we tried it again the next year. And what happened? Number of applications went up again. And how long did this go on? 5 years in a row. 5 years in a row we raised the fees and the number of applicants went up. Why?
Because the brand name.
Because all of the students applying for an MBA, there are 800 MBAs in North America, 800 MBA programs. And the students were calculating the return on investment in an MBA. And they realized that if you went to a top 20 university, you made your money back. You got a better job, you got higher salary, you made your money back in 2 years. If you went below the top 20, you never made the money back, right? And how were they measuring the quality of an MBA program? By the size of the fees. So they were using the size of the fees as an indicator of quality. So that worked really, really well. But after 5 years, the students started saying what? Wait a minute, you cannot keep raising the price 40% a year and leave the product the same. So we had to change the product, the MBA product. So how would you do that? Well, we went to the customer of the customer. Who is the customer of a student, an MBA student? Who is the customer of a student? The employer. And so we asked the employers, what do you think of the current MBA graduates? And they took about 2 seconds to answer that question. And they said, we hate them. We hate them all. They're all useless. Not just yours, the ones from Stanford, Wharton, Harvard. They're all the same. They're all linear thinkers. They think in incremental steps. And they said the problems we have and the opportunities have and the ambitions we have for our companies are so large, they cannot be solved with linear thinkers. And we said, well, what do you want? They said, we want path-bending leaders. Somebody who can come into the organization, look at the performance of the organization, define what the impediments to that performance are, come up with a solution, and bend the performance of my organization exponentially. I don't want to improve the performance gradually. I want to improve the performance of my organization exponentially. That's bend the path of performance. And they said, we want those people. We said, that's wonderful. Can you tell us what those people look like? We have no idea. But if you can produce those people, we will hire them. So we spent the next 5 years trying to understand what that is. And it came down to a set of defining principles of a path-bending leader. And the first one is, the first defining principle of a path-bending leader is question the status quo. You walk into an organization, and it doesn't matter how good or how bad it is, but you look at that organization and you say there must be a better way. Status quo means this is the way it is now. And a path-bending leader will not accept that. They will come in and look at that organization and say there must be a way to improve this organization, even if that organization is Apple or Google or Netflix or whatever it is. All right? Second principle of a path-bending leader. The leader must be confident but not arrogant. Nobody's going to follow an arrogant leader. You have to be good at what you do, but you have to be confident. We asked them, why do you hire Berkeley grads? And they said, well, because the people from Stanford, they're arrogant. Those are not good leaders. We want people who are confident but not arrogant. And then the next one is, you must be a student forever. You cannot stop learning. If you're an innovator, you have to keep learning, keep learning, keep learning. And so we changed the contract with our students. And if you graduate from Berkeley MBA program, you can come back for the rest of your life and take one class every year for free, because we want you to keep learning, right? Anyone want to complete their application for the Berkeley MBA program this evening? Right, excellent, good. And then the final principle is you must focus beyond yourself. You must think about your team, your organization, ethical issues. You cannot be self-interested. Nobody's going to follow somebody who's self-interested. Now, these are 4 defining principles, and we built them into the entire curriculum. And we stopped teaching an MBA. We started teaching path-bending leaders. Did that work or not? Oh, it works really, really well. How do you know? Because we now have every other university and every other business school in the country coming to us saying, what did you just do? How did you do that? What is that? We need to understand that, because that's really making you different, right, and relevant. And the other reason we know it worked is because the employers now hire all our graduates for the very best positions. So guess what? My university had the same problem any one of you could have. We were disrupted. We were disrupted by online education. That stuff, the defining principles, you cannot get that online. You can get good courses on finance, marketing, operations. You can get that anywhere. And that has now become a commodity, right? If you're going to go into a top world-class MBA program, there has to be something more than that. And so we had to come up with something more. And that's called reframing. We call that reframing. We reframed the concept of the education that you can get from an MBA program. And why did we do that? Because we had to stay relevant and we had to stay a leader. If we didn't do that, we would not be relevant and everybody would go off and do online education and we would no longer be a leader. We'd be like any other MBA program. All right? Does that make sense? Okay. So I am a victim of the same thing I'm talking to you about. But we figured out what to do about it. Anything else on the list? Good, long list. Let me look at the lessons. Let's look at the lessons from this one slide. This is a very important slide. The first lesson is, okay, let me skip over that. But this is the first lesson. The first lesson is, look at the list of industries I showed you. Is there anything common among those industries? No, they're all over the place. Why did I choose a wide range of industries that are all over the place? Why? Because no industry is immune. Every industry has customers, stakeholders, they all rely on you for value, and that value can be reframed at any time or disrupted. The way you create that value can be disrupted. I work with many, many companies I was in Mexico, and I was working with executives from an oil and gas company. And they said, oil and gas, there's no way you could disrupt oil and gas. So I gave them the link to a study by the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum produces a digital transformation report every year. And what's the first industry on their digital transformation report last year? Oil and gas. The guy said, go read that report. There's no industry that's immune, right? So that's the first lesson. What is the second lesson? The second lesson is technology has nothing to do with disruption. What causes the disruption? What causes the disruption?
Ideation.
There is a stakeholder or a customer who has a need or a want. They have a problem or a dream or an aspiration, and nobody has been paying attention to it. Right? Why do we have Airbnb? Why? Is Airbnb a technology innovation? No, it's not. What is it? There's a group of people who were looking for a different kind of travel experience. They didn't want to stay in a hotel. They couldn't find a hotel. They found the hotel was too expensive. A whole lot of reasons. Why do we have Uber and ride sharing? Why? Because people were having a lot of problems with taxis. You didn't know when they were going to arrive. You didn't know if they knew where they were going. There were lots of really indifferent taxi drivers who didn't really care about the passenger experience. So what happens is somebody finds that hidden need. In my case in the university, there was a hidden need. What was the hidden need? The overlooked need of employers that was not being addressed. I need a path-bending leader. Nobody's doing that. Great. That's what causes all disruption. And then we find technology and we figure out how to solve it. Now, I love to work with companies on this topic because the first question I ask them is, how well do you understand your stakeholder, or how well do you understand your customer? And you know what answer I always get? We know everything there is to know. We know everything there is to know about our stakeholder and customer. There's nothing new to learn. And my response is, okay, great. Please give me 1 week with your stakeholder or customer, and I will find for you hundreds of things you do not know, right? There's never a company in the world that understands everything there is to understand about its stakeholder and customer. And so where the disruption comes from is there. Remember Kodak? There's an overlooked, underserved problem of a bad photographer. Nobody was helping them. We've got film. There's no solution to their problem. Or there is now. It's called the digital camera. Right? So one of the key lessons is this is not a technology discussion. Technology comes second. The first conversation is who's my stakeholder, who's my customer, and what are the things they are looking for that they cannot get today. Right? Second lesson. Third lesson. A lot of people look at the disruption, the innovation, the reframing innovation, and say, oh, that's really risky. Never been done before. Too risky. Now, a lot of successful companies think that way. Too risky. Never been done before. I don't know if I understand the customer need correctly. I don't know if I understand the solution correctly. I'm not sure if I can build it. I'm not sure if customers will like it. It's too risky. Don't do that. Now, that is a one-sided conversation about risk. That is completely unfair. Everything has risk. Look at this list. Who is winning? Companies on the left or the organizations on the right? Who is winning?
The blue.
The blue, the ones on the right. What's happening to the ones on the left? They're losing. They just have a different kind of risk. What is their risk? Their risk is they lose their leadership. They're no longer relevant. Right? Everything has risk. Not disrupting has a risk. They're just different kinds of risks. Now, what do you do when everything has risk? Stay on the red line, that is risky because you will lose your leadership. Get on the blue line, that is risky because I'm not sure it will work. What do you do when you have two different kinds of risks?
Take the one closer to the success path.
Say it again.
Take the one closer to the success path.
Okay, perhaps. But what do they teach you in finance when you have different types of risk? Diversify. So what is a really effective innovation strategy if you're interested in leadership? If you're interested in leadership, you have a portfolio of innovation. And that portfolio has two parts to it. The first part to it is continue on the red line. That's on the left. Sustain your existing core business. Continue to improve what you do today. Nobody's suggesting you stop doing what you do today. Keep doing it. Keep getting better at it. Keep your current success. At the same time, get onto a blue line. Right? Get onto a blue line. Find a blue line. Reframe the business and the operating model and create something that doesn't currently exist. Do both. And there are different ways, there are different opportunities for us to do that. On the left, we're looking at the experience of our stakeholder and the experience of our customer, and we're looking for ways to understand them better, to engage with them better, to teach them more, to communicate better with them. So there's a lot of things on the left-hand side that we like to do with our current stakeholders and customers to become more effective and efficient. But on the right-hand side, we're questioning the entire vision of our business and the business model assumptions and the way we create value for people. And we're going to create something that we don't currently do. Right? A different set of ambitions for our organization, a different set of business model assumptions, which is basically who's the stakeholder or who's the customer and how to create value for them. And then what are we going to do that actually creates value in a different way? In other words, a blue line. And we do both. So now we have this wonderful portfolio. And this portfolio is a mix of sustaining innovation and reframing innovation, and the circles are your innovation projects. The size of the circle is how much money or energy you're putting into that innovation project, improvement project, and on the left are the sustaining ones, the red ones, improving your current business. On the right are the ones that never existed before. And the vertical axis is showing how unique each of those things are in the eyes of your stakeholder or your customer. Because what we're always trying to do is be relevant and unique. So we're going to ask the stakeholder to tell us how good we are. We're going to do benchmarking. And the benchmarking will look at whether we're the same as the next competitor, whether we're best in class. How many of you do benchmarking trying to become best in class? Nobody? Nobody benchmarks? Really? How do you know how good you are then?
Assumptions.
Oh, an assumption. Okay, right. Well, that's easy. Okay, I just assume I'm the best. Yeah. Right, let me benchmark myself against other organizations that are similar to mine, whether I'm public sector or private sector, it doesn't matter. Because I need to know how good I am in the eyes of a stakeholder, right? Now that's great, but there's a problem with benchmarking that can really create complacency in an organization. And the problem with benchmarking is you're always looking at something that already exists. And the blue lines don't currently exist. So benchmarking does not help you find a blue line innovation opportunity. You're always looking at something that already exists, right? And we don't even know whether the group of other organizations is good or bad. If I give you a basket of apples and they're all bad, and I ask you to pick the best one, you must pick one. That's what happens in benchmarking. That's the best apple. But the problem is, they're all bad. So that's one level of differentiation or uniqueness. But it's still not what we want. We want to be a unique class. So here's basically what's happening. We have an innovation strategy. We have an innovation portfolio. On the left is what we do today. On the left is what we want to do in the future to stay relevant. Right? On the left is your red line. That's what you've been doing today. That's made you successful until today. But things are going to be different in the future. And if you want to stay relevant, you need to find another way to be a leader. That's the right-hand side. And we look at how unique it is or not unique. So that's now the way we think about an innovation strategy. Of course, there has to be a goal for that innovation strategy. So what is the goal of this portfolio? What is the goal of all innovation strategies? The goal of all innovation strategies is to either make you more efficient as an organization or to make you more effective. What does it mean to be effective? Your stakeholders and customers recognize you as the best choice for solving their problems or pursuing their ambitions. In other words, they recognize you as effective. They recognize you as the leader. All innovation is trying to do one or the other of those two objectives. I'm going to be efficient or I'm going to be effective. Now, how do we measure effectiveness? How do you measure whether the customer or the stakeholder believes you are effective? They come back. In other words, we measure their loyalty. We measure their loyalty, right? Well, actually, we've discovered that satisfied customers are not loyal. So we've actually discovered, it's an interesting conversation, loyal customers are much more than satisfied. I'll explain in a moment. Satisfied customers are actually not loyal. They switch all the time, right? So measuring satisfaction is actually not the right thing to do. But basically, that's how we measure effectiveness. We have a stakeholder, could be a citizen. We have a customer, could be B2C, could be B2B. We measure their loyalty. So how do you measure loyalty? Well, let's take a look at what happens. That portfolio is the key to creating the loyalty. And it's also the key to your reputation. Where does your reputation come from? Comes from the customer, comes from what people say about you, right? Right? And with social networking and social media, a lot of companies have lost control over their reputation because it's being determined by what other people say about you, right? So your reputation is driven by what other people say about you. Your profit and revenue is determined by the customer. Why? Because all money comes from customers, right? Right? And so your growth, your economic viability, your reputation all comes from having this loyalty. So we better understand what that is. And here's a very quick 2-second lesson on how to think about loyalty. How do we measure whether somebody's loyal? The gentleman over here said they come back. Does that mean they're loyal? Let me give you an example of what it means to come back. My first home is San Francisco. My second home is Sydney, Australia. My third home is United Airlines. I live in an airline. I am one of United Airlines' top 50 passengers worldwide. They have 50 million passengers. So you are looking at 1 in a million. I am literally 1 in a million, right? Now, how do you become a top 50 passenger on United Airlines? Well, you keep going back. So here's my question. I've been going back for 30 years using United. I use other airlines, but that's my main airline, and I've been doing that for 30 years, and I've become their top 50 passenger. Am I loyal?
No,
No, I'm not. Why do you say that?
because they may be paying your ticket.
Oh, they're not paying my ticket. No, they're charging me a lot. They're not paying my ticket. Because there's more to loyalty than somebody coming back. Think about that on a personal level. As I assume you're all married, right? What does repeat purchase mean in a marriage? Well, you go home every night, right? Is that enough to prove you are loyal? No, of course not, right? If you don't go home, then clearly you're not loyal, right? But just because you go home, that doesn't mean that you've met the test of being loyal, right? Yes?
You mean the same home.
Oh, the same, yes. Well, the same person, yeah. Anyway, yeah, all right, I understand, yeah. No, you don't just measure my behavior, you have to ask me how I feel about it. And you have to ask me whether I'm willing to support you. So asking me how I feel about it is called sentiment. Asking me whether I'm willing to support you is called proactive behavior. I'm willing to give you information. I'm willing to recommend you to other people. I'm willing to buy other things you want to sell me. And the consideration set, which means I won't consider anybody else. How do I feel about United? Very unhappy. Am I willing to support them? Am I willing to recommend them? No, I'm not. Am I going to stop looking at any other airline? No, I'm not. So actually, I'm not loyal. I'm what's called behaviorally loyal. But I am not attitudinally loyal. We have two types of loyal. Behavioral loyalty means somebody comes back, they are satisfied, or maybe not, but they're satisfied, but they're passive. They're not active. What we're trying to get is active loyalty, where somebody becomes a supporter and they do a lot of very different things when they become that active supporter. Here's some data where we compare two customers. One is attitudinally loyal, the other is behaviorally loyal, right? That's the only difference between them. They have the same amount of money to spend. The one that is, and this is in B2B, this is a B2B setting. One of the customers is attitudinally loyal, the other one is behaviorally loyal. The one that is attitudinally loyal is much more active in word of mouth, which is building your reputation, but they're 50% more profitable. And when we go to a B2C setting, what do we find? In B2C, we find the same thing. The ones that are attitudinally loyal they're 120% more profitable, and they're much more active in spreading word of mouth about you. So this has become a really important metric of how effective you are. Loyalty. If you're effective with the stakeholder or customer, they're going to become attitudinally loyal. So here's the question about innovation. What kind of innovation portfolio creates that kind of loyalty? What kind of innovation portfolio turns a stakeholder or a customer into an advocate, into somebody who is a proactive supporter of your organization? When do you get excited about something that you've seen? When do you get excited about an experience or a product or something? When do you get excited and say, oh, I have to tell my friends? When?
When it's something different.
When it's unique.
Right.
Not just when it's better, but when it's unique. When is the other time you get excited about something? When it's new. You've never seen it before. Right. This is the first time I've seen it. All right, so what kind of innovation creates this loyalty that we are after? Unique and new. What kind of innovation is that? Innovation in the top right-hand corner of the portfolio. Innovation in the top right-hand corner of the portfolio is unique and new. Reframing, pioneering, first time somebody did anything, right? So here's a really simple test of whether your innovation portfolio is effective. The measure of effectiveness is we have active, proactive, loyal customers or stakeholders supporting us. That's the test. And now we know that that requires a particular kind of portfolio. So that's the concept. Let me show you what happens. What can go wrong with that portfolio? This is what can go wrong. You remember BlackBerry, and you all had one. Do you remember you used to go to business meetings and everybody had a BlackBerry and they would all proudly play with their BlackBerry so you could all see that they had one? And now you go to a business meeting and anybody has a BlackBerry, they hide it under the table because they're embarrassed, right? Now, BlackBerry had the highest customer loyalty of any electronic device in the world. Everybody loved their BlackBerry. Within 3 years, they lost it. And my students work in all these companies. Guess when those students call me? When things are going well or when things are not going well? Not going. So when did I get the call? I got the call from my students at BlackBerry, and they said, Professor Wilton, you have to come and see us quick. We need help. When was that? That was in 2010. So I flew to BlackBerry in Canada, and I met with the chief executives, and I asked them, what's the problem? We're losing our market share. We're losing our customer loyalty. Things are terrible. We have to do something. And I asked them, what is your goal? What do you hope to achieve? And they said, we want to recapture the excitement about BlackBerry. We want customers to be excited about BlackBerry again. We want them to start talking about BlackBerry. We want them to be attitudinally loyal. I said, great, that's fine. In my head, I knew that they needed a portfolio of products and services and customer experiences. They needed a portfolio in the top right-hand corner. So I asked them to show me their innovation projects. What is everything on your innovation road map for the next 5 years? And here is what they showed me. What is that? Sustaining or reframing? Unique or not unique? What kind of loyalty will that produce? Are customers going to become excited about that? Again, no, they're not, right? So we had a conversation. And the conversation is, I'm sorry, there's a logic disconnect. You want customers to be excited, but you're giving them the same thing you've always given them, and it's not unique. You're not going to have attitudinally loyal customers. They're not going to be excited. So you have two choices. One is give up the goal of making people excited, or change the portfolio. So that's where it got really interesting, and they went off. The chief executive called everybody together and sent them out to find something reframing and to make something unique. But they still failed. Why? It's never too late. That wasn't the reason. They put a condition on the innovation strategy. The chief executive said you must continue to use, whatever you do, whatever you come up with, you must continue to use our key asset in the organization. And there was one thing BlackBerry was famous for. BlackBerry was famous for doing email in a business environment in a safe way. And how did they do that? They had a captive network through which they sent all the emails. It was their own global server network. They owned it. They never used anybody else's servers. They never used anybody else's network. Everything went through their network. And the chief executive made the assumption that that was always going to be necessary and always going to be important. Right? Now we get taught that core competencies live forever. No, they don't. Sometimes they become a problem. So that was like me asking you to go out and solve global warming, but you must use fossil fuels, right? It doesn't make any sense. And that is why BlackBerry failed. Now, what caused the problem for BlackBerry? Why? What caused it? What caused it is this. 2007, Apple introduces the iPhone. Was Apple an early or late entrant into the phone business? Late. I told you, it may never be too late. They came late. They were one of the last. There was Nokia, there was Sony, there was Samsung, there was Android, there was all of them. There were dozens of them. Motorola, and here comes Apple and takes over. How did they do that? How did they do that? Something unique and something new. So here is basically what they did. And I want to share with you the Apple formula to innovation. It's not about Steve Jobs. They've got a very codified formula about how they think about innovation. And it uses the portfolio. The first thing they do is they do something everybody else does. They do something sustaining. They make hardware. But they make sure it's unique. Right? The Apple hardware is known for easy to use, and it looks very modern and elegant. How about the battery life on the iPhone? It's terrible, right? Well, how do you get to be unique? You focus on two things and you ignore everything else. Apple knows the battery life is terrible, but they don't care. They only care about easy to use and looks good. All right, that's how you become unique. You focus on two things. So that's the sustaining part. But then they come to the right-hand side of the portfolio and they solve a customer problem that's never been solved before. Do you remember the iPod, which was an MP3 player? What was the problem with the MP3 player? The customer problem, the user problem? It wasn't a hardware problem, it was what? Where do I find the music? Where do I find the music? How do I find the music? How do I download the music? How do I organize the music? How do I synchronize the music across multiple devices? And how do I do all of that legally instead of using peer-to-peer file sharing, which was illegal? App Store, iTunes. Problem solved. Why didn't any other MP3 player company do that? And then came the phone. And Apple looked at the phone and they said, BlackBerry, that's great, wonderful, thank you very much. You have introduced everybody to mobile computing. Email on a phone, that's called mobile computing. Thank you very much. Let me talk to the customer. Let me see if the customer would like to do anything else besides email. And they discovered, what did customers want to do on their phone? Everything. So we will solve that problem by offering everything in an app store. Now, why didn't Nokia see that? Why didn't Sony see that? Why didn't Motorola see that? Why didn't they? Why? Why didn't they? Because they were not looking broadly enough at the experience of the user. They were looking at a piece of hardware. They were looking at a product. They were focused on the features of the product. They were focused on technology. They were not focused on a customer at all. And one thing we know about Apple is they're focused on a customer, and they do this every 3 to 5 years. They will find a product category where there's a hidden customer need or problem, and they will go in and solve it. They did it with the computer, they did it with the MP3 player, they did it with the phone, and then they're doing it with a wearable device. And next year or the year after, it will be something else. It will be cars or something else. Who knows? So what business are they in? They're in an innovation business. You can't define it by products. They've got a codified innovation formula that uses this portfolio. And sitting in the middle is their brand and the customer experience in the retail and store. And that's unique too, right? So that is why this company is so highly valued, because people think there's no limit to the growth of that company, right? Samsung, they're a hardware company. That's all they are. They're a hardware company. They use somebody else's platform. They use somebody else's app store. They're a hardware company. So there we are. That's a really important part of the conversation. Another one that I think is really interesting is this company. This company is Tesla. They're not making any money at all, but they're valued almost as highly as General Motors, and they're valued at twice the value of Ford. Why is that? This is their loyalty score, by the way. It's called the Net Promoter Score. 96.6% of their customers are attitudinally loyal, advocates. Why? What did they do differently? Once again, there were many, many electric cars out there. And these guys come in and they take over the electric car market. And they get valued at twice the value of Ford. Why? 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 Because even though they're not making any money today, everybody expects them to be the future leader. We expect them to grow. And why do we expect them to grow? Because they have reframed the entire concept of a car. Is this really a car or is it something else? It's actually a piece of software on wheels. It's primarily a piece of software. I've been to the R&D lab of Tesla. How much metal do you see in the R&D lab? Nothing. What do you see in the R&D lab? You see 500 computer screens and software engineers working on software. And so the first thing that this company did is they reframed the concept of vehicle ownership. With most vehicles, you buy a new vehicle and you drive it away, what starts happening? It depreciates. You talk to Tesla customers and they say, this is the first car I've ever owned that keeps getting better the longer you own it. And why is that? Because they reboot the software once a month while you're sleeping. And all the guys that I know that have one, they can't wait. They wake up in the morning and they get in the car and they tell them, what's it going to do today? It's going to do something different, right? They get really excited by it. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is they solved the unsolved problem of an electric vehicle. What is the unsolved problem of an electric vehicle? How far can I go? It's called range anxiety. Everybody's terrified of being stuck on a road somewhere and the battery went flat and you've got nowhere to go. And it's the middle of the night and it's dark and it's terrible and it's stormy, it's terrible. And they solved that problem. How did they solve that problem? The charging infrastructure. They built fast charging stations, like petrol stations, like gas stations. And they're everywhere. And you pull in and you plug it in and it takes 30 minutes and you get a 90% charge, right? And you have a cup of coffee or whatever you have, right? And they've offered that technology free to the owner. They've also offered that technology to any other electric vehicle company that has fast charging technology. And none of them do, right? And now there's about 100 new electric vehicles that are going to be launched in the next 5 years. But there's companies, independent companies that have done a review of all these new electric vehicles that are coming, even vehicles by Audi and BMW and all of them, and they've concluded that the Tesla technology and the Tesla advantage, accumulated advantage, is so large that even with another 100 competitors coming, Tesla's going to stay a leader. And that is why they're so highly valued. So, and they changed the distribution model, which we don't really have time to talk about. So let me just leave this conversation with this really interesting message. This is a piece of data that I think you find very interesting. These are the top 5 companies that are publicly traded in the United States that have made the most money for shareholders over a 10-year period, from 2005 to 2015. These 5 companies have made the most money for investors on the stock market. So they're on the stock market and they've made the most money. Does that list surprise you? Is that the list you would have come up with if I asked you to find the 5 companies that made the most money for investors over a 10-year period? Would you have come up with that list? No, you wouldn't, right? You would have had Apple on the list, but the other ones you would not have thought of. The Celgene is a biotech company, so we'll leave them aside. What about the other 4? What's common about the other 4? Oh, they're asset light. They're asset light. That's one really big issue. They don't care about the assets. They're platform businesses. They're platform businesses for bringing together a lot of different parts of a customer experience, right? They're platform businesses. Platform businesses are asset light. They're just platforms for people to connect and buy products and services and get customer experiences. So that's kind of an ecosystem concept. That's one really big reason. What is the other big reason these companies have made the most money for shareholders? They all reframed value in their industries. Priceline is in the travel industry. They own Booking.com. Priceline was the first travel website to do reverse auctions, where you name the price you want to pay, and they go out and find an airline or a hotel to sell you a room at that price. And now they own Booking.com. And Booking.com controls 50% of travel reviews in the world. And Booking.com charges every hotel. People go to Booking.com to choose the right hotel, choose the right airline, and then they book at Booking.com. And all of the hotels and airlines have lost control of their reputation because it's all being controlled by Booking.com. And Booking.com charges those hotels and airlines 20 to 25% commission for doing nothing other than being a platform, right? And other than providing feedback and a place for people to go to share their experiences. And then we have Netflix. By the way, Netflix. Do you know how Netflix was founded? Yeah.
It was a disruption to the Blockbuster by DVD mailing at that time.
Yeah, but do you know what okay, you're right, totally right. There was actually a customer of Blockbuster, and Blockbuster was a physical store, and you went to rent a DVD, and you could keep it for 2 days, and if you brought it back late, what happened? Late fee. And one customer called Reed Hastings rented a DVD, and he forgot about it for a month. And he took it back. I'm sorry, you owe me $100 in late fees. And he argued with them. And of course, their business model is make money from late fees, so they didn't forgive him. He paid the $100 and he walked out the door and said, I'm going to create a business that destroys Blockbuster. See the importance of a customer problem or an issue? And he did. He created Netflix, which was a mail order DVD. And the one feature of the mail order Netflix business was no late fees. And now it's a streaming business. And now he spends more money on producing original content than all the movie houses in Hollywood. Okay, so we got to stop. But Apple and Salesforce.com, each one of these businesses has reframed value. And they've emerged as a leader and taken over from the old people. So what are you supposed to do? You've got to build a balanced portfolio. The easy part of that portfolio is improving your current business. The challenging part of that portfolio is finding a blue line and committing to it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity to share this conversation with you.
Thank you, Professor Wilton. Please, we're going to open up the floor for questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and use the mic. And let's try to limit to one question, please.
I always wonder what could be the disruptive business for a company like IKEA, for example, who has thought of everything, then what could be even better than that?
That is really interesting. So the question was, what could disrupt IKEA? Actually, IKEA is having a very difficult problem. Why? IKEA is struggling. Why? Does anyone know? The designs are stale. It's a very clear, consistent design. That's not the main problem. People are positioning them. They're positioned as a product for students, right? Students buy it, so they've lost the sort of growing affluent market. But basically, people are just tired of assembling that product, and they're tired of walking into the back of an IKEA warehouse and trying to find out. Now, what big box is the one I'm looking for? The actual in-store experience has become too frustrating for people, and the assembly has become too frustrating for people. And those are the two key features of their business, right? You assemble. So that is becoming very tiring for people, and they're losing a lot of market share at the moment, right? But basically, the answer to what could disrupt IKEA is quite simple. Go and talk to an IKEA customer, or go and talk to somebody who's not an IKEA customer, and ask them, what are you not getting from IKEA? The way you disrupt is you ask people, you don't go and ask people how to improve what IKEA is doing. That's red line. You go to the customer or somebody who's not a customer and you say, well, what are you not able to get from IKEA? And that will give you the answer to how IKEA could be disrupted. Marcel?
Yeah. So the issue with innovation, a lot of existing companies and established incumbents are aware of the importance of the innovation. So the will and the incentive to innovate and disrupt is there. But I can see the problem is with startups versus established companies.
Yeah.
And in most of the cases, it is the startups that disrupted the industry. And because established companies are rigid, they don't have, it's a capability to be able to innovate.
Right.
So what do you think differentiates established companies that can compete with startups and be able to innovate?
Sure. You're actually asking a really critical question. There is more to the presentation that kind of answers that. Basically, can we put this back up? Let me ask you this question. What is different about managing reframing innovation versus sustaining innovation? What is different? You're in a company, you've got to do sustaining innovation, which is continuous improvement, and then somebody says, go off and do something reframing. What is different? And the answer is everything, right? We recognize that these are so different that it's really almost impossible for an established company to do it internally. It can be done internally, but strategic objective is different. Strategic objective of sustaining innovation is improve what already exists and become best in class. Strategic objective of reframing innovation is create something that doesn't exist and become unique class.
So would you recommend corporate venturing? Would that be a solution that you recommend for someone?
Well, there's a lot more to this, like, you know, how much information do you have? What's the time frame? What is the success factor? The critical success factor on reframing innovation is prove that it works and go educate the market, because they've never seen it before. The critical success factor on sustaining innovation is do it before the competition does. So everything is different. Now, most companies don't understand that. They have a business case review process where you go and ask for resources. And that business case review process is designed for sustaining innovation. So we come along with a crazy idea. Let me show you. You're my boss, okay? Quick role play. You're my boss. I work for you. It is the year 2000. I've come up with a smartphone, and I want to explain it to you, and I want you to support me. Right? So 7 years before the iPhone actually arrived, I've come up with it. And I want to describe it to you, and I want you to let me know if you have any questions. Okay? Hello, boss. Having a good day?
Yeah.
Come on, you're my boss.
Yeah.
Have you got a minute? I want to explain this idea. Okay? Got a minute?
Go ahead.
Okay, it's called a smartphone. Any questions?
Explain it to me.
Oh, it's this amazing thing, right? Of course it's a phone, but it's everything. It's everything you possibly want. It's a camera, it's a computer, it's a calendar, it's a diary, it's a radio, it's everything all in one, the size of a phone. Any more questions?
How much does it cost?
I don't know yet because, we've never made one, but and a lot of the parts don't exist yet. It needs a thing called Gorilla Glass. And nobody makes Gorilla Glass yet, but I'm going to find somebody who'll make it. All right, any more questions? Huh? How much? What, to make it? Or how much do I want? To make it? It's probably going to cost as much as a PC. Any more questions? But I don't really know. Any more questions? Who's going to buy it? Who's not going to buy it? Everybody's going to want it. I'm going to sell millions of them, hundreds of millions of them. Any more questions?
Yeah. What did you say your name was?
Yeah, right. I'm your most highly valued employee because I'm going to keep you a leader into the future. Any more questions? How many of you work in an environment where the answers that I gave you are considered acceptable? Right, none of you, right? You have this problem. And the problem is you have a business case review process and a resource allocation process that is designed for sustaining innovation, and you expect me to know the answer. Do you realize that when it's reframing, the answers that I gave you are the actual, real, honest answers? And if I told you I knew, I'm lying to you. You should never believe me. I have no idea. And most organizations don't understand this governance process. Everything about these two types of innovation is different. And so we actually need two parallel governance processes. We need two parallel innovation models. And the simple rule is you never ask the same people to do both. You never ask the same team, you never ask the same department, you never have the same business unit to do both. You separate them. And the best example of that is actually Nestle. Nestle got attacked by Starbucks. Nestle used to own the coffee business, the instant coffee business. They owned that business, and along came Starbucks and said, you're not buying coffee, you're buying two things. You're buying a coffee experience, right? There's lots of different coffees, and you need to take the time, you need to understand where they came from and how they smell and how they taste, and that's an experience. And they also said, we're going to sell you the third place. Your first place is home, second place is work. The third place you're going to go to meet people and talk is Starbucks. And we're going to create this business like that. What happened to Nestle's business in the US? Nestle, instant coffee business, just disappeared. And so the management of Nestle said, go find a Starbucks killer. Right? We got to do something. This is terrible. And they tried forever to find out what to do from inside the parent. Couldn't come up with anything. Finally, they created a garage. We call them garages, right? Why do we call them garages? And a separate innovation team outside the parent. Why do we call them that? Because that's where Apple was created. That's where Hewlett-Packard was created. They're all created in, the garages of their parents. So we call them garages, and off you go. And as soon as they did that, guess what the garage came up with? They came up with the Nespresso machine. So now you have the coffee experience at home. And now Nestle sells you the same instant coffee, but they charge you 5 times the price. Right? So sometimes really difficult to manage this stuff from inside the parent, and they create garages. But you don't need to create a garage. All you need to understand is these two models. And there's many other parts of this model, right? And you just need to have two different governance models inside your business. And if you can do that, if you understand that and let that work properly, then you don't need to create a garage. You just have it's all inside the parent, but it's just a different set of strategic goals, risk management, success factors, timeframes, all sorts of things, right? Most companies don't understand that. Most leaders have never. I actually work for the Institute of Company Directors in Australia. They've created a special panel to teach directors of public companies in Australia about innovation. Right? The board of directors should be managing the money that's going into innovation, right? They shouldn't be doing it, but they should be managing it. And this is the number one concept we're teaching directors. These two parallel governance models. Because most directors have never heard of this, right? And they try and evaluate everything under the sustaining model.
How frequent should you come up with a unique and a new product? For instance, you come up with one today. Mm-hmm. Do you wait, let's say, a year or two and measure the loyalty of the customers who would like to take this? And then you say, well, I have to be ahead of the market. Mm-hmm. I have to come up with a new one. Just like I think BlackBerry, who should have decided, who should have been brave enough to kill it and come up with a new product. Right. But they didn't. Yeah. That depends on quite a few things, which is the rate at which customer expectations are changing. But realistically, what it depends upon is how easy it is for somebody else to imitate what you're doing. We call that leadership externalities. So
if what you've done is difficult for somebody else to imitate, and customers are still getting value out of it, then you don't need to innovate or replace it that often. If you look at what Apple does, how often do they release a new phone, for example? Well, they release a phone about once a year. How often do they go into a whole new market or a whole new category and reframe in a new category? Once every 3 to 5 years. So their long-term innovation strategy is once every 5 years we'll do something reframing, truly reframing. What they do with the iPhone 10 is sustaining. You look at Google. What is the red line at Google? The red line at Google is search and YouTube, right? The Google search engine is their red line business. That's their sustaining business. And so what they did is they restructured their business. They have Alphabet, the parent company, and now they've got the red line business, which is YouTube and Google. And then they've got another group called X. And inside X is 10 moonshots. What is a moonshot? That's a new category with at least 1 billion customers. Healthcare. Driverless cars. Right? They've got like 10 of these. They're in a garage somewhere. And they're going to take 7 to 10 years to come to life. By the way, if you were trying to, if you were Microsoft, why didn't Microsoft Bing succeed? Why not? Microsoft's always been a reactor. Why didn't they?
Performance-wise, Google was better?
Well, yes. Well, first of all, it's not easy to reverse engineer Google. Right? The reactor tries to reverse engineer everything and make something better, but sometimes you can't even figure out what the pioneer did, and you can't reverse engineer it. And by the time you reverse engineer it, what has Google done? They're on to the next iteration. So they're constantly iterating on the red line with search, which is why Microsoft has basically given up trying to imitate on search. Right? It was difficult to reverse engineer, difficult to out-imitate, and if you did out-imitate, they're already on to the next iteration. So we've got to do a certain amount of that, but in terms of the major reframing, it's much less often.
Thank you. We have time for one more question.
May I ask just how many products or services you can put in your portfolio in that fourth quadrant? In that, because I mean, if you go through the literature and the experiences, can a company, can an organization succeed with 3 or 4 unique value class products or services?
What is the issue there?
I mean,
is it money? Is it?
I'm talking about the capability of running such a project, not necessarily the money. I mean, sometimes the shortage of money is not the issue for lots of
right. It's not the money. It's never the money. Right. It's not. Well, we just look at the Google X, right? And Google X got 10 moonshots going on.
Yeah,
right?
but if you go through the zoning, you're experimenting, and I'm not sure some of it is called zone 2. I mean, it reaches that unique value when you manage to get a real customer experience that or a unique value proposition. Right now, they're prototyping and trying to find the real customer value approach, because you could do 10 years of research in that point and still, but the moment you capture that is the moment you create the disruption of the innovation, because I guess that's it's not just the creation of value, it's the capturing of value itself that makes it. Can an organization have more than one into that direction?
Okay, so good question. The portfolios are really defined for a specific customer segment. So there's a segment there that we're trying to become a leader in. Leadership's always defined at a segment level. Nobody owns the whole market. You only own segments. So we look at a segment and we say, what are the problems we're trying to solve? What are the dreams of the customer we're trying to address? And what's in the portfolio is maybe a product, maybe a service, some kind of support behind the product, like education, delivery, that kind of stuff. Something about customer experience. I'll explain that in just one second. Something about your brand and your reputation. So there's a combination of things lined up around a consistent experience for a segment. You've got another portfolio for another segment. So you've really got 4 or 5 major categories of space of where you could spend the money for that in that portfolio. You need enough allocated in the top right-hand corner to actually move the loyalty needle. And one of the big problems we have with reframing innovation is a thing called active inertia. And basically what that is somebody starts to go off on a reframing path and they under-resource it. And if you under-resource it, it grows up malnourished, right? Now, why does a company under-resource something reframing? They do that not because they can't find the money. They do that because of a thing called inertia. So General Motors, for example, needs to make electric vehicles. What are they doing? Are they resourcing that as though it's their future? No, they're doing what's called play to play. They're not doing play to win. And the reason they're doing play to play is what would happen if they actually really resourced and aggressively pursued electric vehicles? Well, it's going to destroy the internal combustion engine. And they're not going to allow that to happen. So that's called the inertia. So the current existing model becomes inertia. That is the bigger problem. It's not how much activity is in there. It is, can you get around the inertia? Are you willing to play to win instead of play to play? And this is the number one problem with disruptive innovation in an established business. Everybody's doing something, everybody's trying to be different, and everybody's trying to pioneer something new. But in most established businesses, they're playing to play instead of playing to win, which means they're under-resourcing it. And the reason they're doing that is because of all of the current success in their other business. I think that's the more important issue in how much can I put in there. So 2 things, how much do you need to put in there to move the loyalty needle, and can you get around active inertia? Yeah. Good question.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Great talk. Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Oh no, fun, good questions.